The 6th Annual Assembly of Planners Symposium, combined with the Pacific Risk Management Ohana, or PRIMO, was held on August 18th and 19th, 2021 at the Dusatani Guam Resort and was brought to you by the Bureau of Statistics and Plans Guam Coastal Management Program with a grant from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. This two-day symposium was a hybrid conference, hosting live, in-person, and virtual attendance via Zoom. The theme of the symposium was Perseverance, Building Resilience, and Navigating the Way Forward. Up next, CRDC Resonate Plastic Project, presented by Donald Thompson, founder of CRDC Global.
So, are we having fun? I'll tell you, I mean, it's been a while since I was at the Bureau of Planning, but this is really a lot of information, and it's going to be a continuing education credit for a lot of folks here too. So, so far, great conference. So we've got a good afternoon coming up, but before we get there, we've got one more speaker while you're finishing up your lunch, and he is going to be virtual, and I would like to introduce Donald Thompson. He is the CRDC Global founder and chairman. And that company is really interesting. It's a company that specializes in creating value from the world's plastic waste, something we all know about. He's the driving force behind the company's unique and proprietary process that accepts any type of plastic waste and converts it into a range of concrete additives marketed under the product name Resin 8. Donald started his career as a product designer in Canada before relocating to Costa Rica in 1990. Combining his passion for innovation with his knowledge of construction, he successfully filed multiple global patents for prefabricated panels used in housing prior to starting CRDC Global. So now, virtually, we would like to welcome Donald Thompson.
Hello, everyone. Actually, Ross Gibby, our CEO, is going to do the presentation today. So, but thank you very much for the introduction and the opportunity to present here today.
Hi, everyone. Let me just share my screen, and we'll start the presentation in a moment. Okay. So I'm going to assume everyone can see my screen. As Don mentioned, I am the Chief Operating Officer of CRDC Global. Just by way of introduction, we're going to start off with about a 12 to 15 minute overview of CRDC Global, as well as Resonate, our plastic processing technology. And then we'll spend the last couple of minutes fielding questions, and Donald Thompson, our founder and chairman, will be here for those questions. So CRDC, we call ourselves internally the concrete solution to plastic waste. And our mission, and essentially our call to action, is to create appreciating value from the world's plastic waste. Now, we specifically say appreciating because we're not satisfied with temporary value. We want to create long-term, very permanent value from the world's plastic waste. And in doing so, generate environmental, economic, and social value for everyone, for every community, for the entire world. Now, we're all very, very familiar with the problem here, but it warrants repeating. Only 9.5% of plastic waste worldwide is currently being recycled. The remaining 90.5% is incinerated, ends up in landfills, or, as you're probably well aware in Guam, ends up in the ocean and therefore ends up on the beaches. And of the amount of plastic waste that is incinerated, up to about 150 million tons of the equivalent of CO2, of greenhouse gases, is emitted per year due to plastic incineration. So obviously, I'm sure this is all top of mind for everyone. It's not something that we can deny. It's not something that we can any longer avoid. As I mentioned, we call ourselves the concrete solution to plastic waste, and we are a scalable solution. Resonate, you see a pile of it right there, is a breakthrough eco-aggregate. We call it an eco-aggregate or an eco-additive, depending on how it's utilized in a concrete mix, but it's made from mixed plastic waste. In fact, we can accept all types of mixed plastic waste, resins 1 through 7. When you think about normal recycling streams, People think about ones, they think about twos. When you turn the plastic item over, the little triangle with the number in the middle, ones and twos generally get recycled. Occasionally fives do, but the remainder of them do not get recycled and therefore end up leaking into the environment, end up in landfills, or end up being incinerated. And what our process does is we convert all of that into an environmental aggregate, environmentally benign and friendly aggregate that improves concrete performance. We actually improve structural components of concrete. We improve thermal components. And obviously, because of our benefits of landfill diversion and incineration diversion, we also provide environmental benefits. Now, our patented process it's also very environmentally friendly. We do not use any water. Most recycling technologies, they require uniform grades of plastic that are clean, and therefore they, in most cases, need to be washed. We do not wash our plastic waste. We do what we call dry cleaning. And what that is we precondition the mixed plastic after shredding it with 2 mineral additives. One is calcium hydroxide, the other is ash, just waste ash in a lot of cases. Sometimes we use fly ash from coal. Sometimes we use, in the case of Costa Rica, sugarcane ash. In the case of the United States, where I am, we use biomass ash from energy production facilities. And what those 2 mineral additives do on the front end of our process are they neutralize pathogens and odors, but they also have a benefit on the back end of our process, and I'll go into that in a minute. We take that mixture of shredded plastic waste with the 2 mineral additives, and we run it through a heated extrusion process with a small amount of moisture. And we produce what's called what we call a hybrid mineral polymer. It's no longer just plastic anymore. Once we melt it in with the mineral additives, we call it a hybrid mineral polymer. And that moisture actually serves a purpose. When it comes out of the end of the extruder, it actually expands. The moisture, it acts as like a blowing agent, and it expands that material when it comes out of the extruder and creates an open cell structure. And so what that does is it drops into a cooling bath and it hardens. And what we get is something that really looks like a plastic lava rock. It's a lump of material that really looks exactly like a plastic lava rock. And we take that bulk material and we granulate it. And when we granulate it into the size, shape, and gradation that's required by standard concrete mix designs. And you'll see a photo of that on the bottom right there. So what differentiates us and our product is that Resonate can be used in not only non-structural applications, but structural applications. Most people have tried to put plastic waste into concrete products before, but most of the time they put it directly, they shred it, and they put it directly into a concrete matrix. And plastic on its own does not bond well with cement. Therefore, we have converted that material to be to avoid being hydrophobic, and it bonds well with cement. And as a result, we maintain strength. And that structural strength allows us to be utilized in all structural applications, including concrete blocks and pavers. You see that photo on the left there. Precast concrete, that photo in the middle is actually in South Africa, that's utilizing Resonate in drainage pipes that go underneath roadways, and in poured in place concrete as well. And I'll go into a variation of our product that's utilized very much in poured in place concrete in a minute. So Resonate has been extensively tested and accepted by the construction industry. Don, as the bio articulated, is from the construction industry. So we like to say that this has been developed by the construction industry for the construction industry. It's not necessarily from the plastic waste industry looking for a way to eliminate plastic waste. It was approached from the construction side. So how do we provide a benefit first and foremost to the construction industry, and how do we utilize plastic waste in order to do that? And we have successfully accomplished that. It is the only material from plastic waste that is accepted for structural applications. We have passed ASTM testing, and a lot of our testing has been done by the National Concrete Masonry Association in the United States. Now, first and foremost, what's important in the construction industry is maintenance of appearance. We did not want our tiny little colorful flecks of plastic to be in the concrete itself. Again, that's immediately going to compromise structural integrity, but it also would not be adopted at a large scale by the concrete and the construction industry. So maintenance of appearance was paramount, or was very important on the front end. But more importantly is the maintenance of strength. And I mentioned early on the addition of the calcium hydroxide and the ash. Now, if you look at the magnification there, you see that open cell structure that I talked about. And one of the reasons that we maintain strength is because with that open cell structure, the cement paste actually permeates into all of those cavities and becomes embedded, or it becomes completely encapsulated. The resonate becomes completely encapsulated into the cement matrix. But when we granulate the resonate, the bulk resonate material, what it does is it exposes the calcium hydroxide and the ash components, and those are pre-existing components of cement. So not only do we get this mechanical bonding from the open cell structure and the angularity and the inconsistency of the granulated material, but we also get a chemical bonding. And again, this is what allows for the increased, in a lot of cases, strength. We also have a maintenance of fire resistance, and we have a significant reduction of weight. Resonate, in most cases, replaces sand or fine aggregates, and it is by volume 1/4 of the weight of the material it replaces. So as a result, we get a considerable reduction of weight in the concrete products that it's utilized in. It also lowers water absorption and also improves insulation. So what we find is our R value, we've had this tested with ASTM testing, our R value of the raw resonate material is about 3 times the sand that it replaces. And when we put it into a concrete block, which generally we put in relatively small percentages, in about 5%, we see about a 20% improvement in insulation. So in warm climates, it actually keeps the homes cooler. In colder climates, it allows the homes to, one, stay warmer and also use less energy over time. So again, as I just mentioned, less energy, that is one of the environmental credentials that Resonate allows for. Diversion from landfill and incineration, that's one of them. Extended use of the plastic waste. No leaching or microplastic release. We have done a white paper on microplastic release potential. We actually put resonate into paving stones of a roadway, and we used a heavy vehicle simulator, and it took about, I think it was 500,000 passes, and the microplastic release was negligible. We're also supporting climate resiliency and net zero goals. Again, because of our higher insulative qualities, we're reducing the energy usage of buildings. And what's probably one of the most important things, or at least one of the questions we get asked the most, is, well, what happens to it at the end of life of the concrete? In other words, in 80 to 100 years, what happens when that building gets torn down? What happens to the plastic then? Well, because we're only putting it in a relatively small percentage into the concrete matrix, it gets completely encapsulated by the concrete. And so at the end of life of that concrete, that just gets crushed up into rubble and recycled as aggregate into the next version of concrete. So rather than using plastic waste in a full closed circular loop of plastic, what we're doing is we're moving it to a different recycling loop, and that's a recycling loop of concrete, and that will have an eternal recycling loop and usage. Resonate does contribute to green building design. 2 examples here. I won't go into each one because I know we're short on time, but new construction as well as multifamily high rise. You can see minimum energy usage. construction and demolition waste management, storage and collection of recyclables. We get lead points for all of these. Now, I'm gonna get a little bit into the philosophy of CRDC. We have an approach that was developed by Donald Thompson in the very, very early days of CRDC. It's an approach to innovation. It's approach to everything we do at CRDC. It's essentially our foundation, and that is called REAP. REAP is recover, enrich, appreciate, prosper. And now when we apply that to Resonate itself, the 4 stages of REAP are recover. That's the collection. That's the recollection of the plastic material. We do have a program called the Bag That Builds, and we're working on that with the United Nations Development Program to recover plastic. But we also work with a number of industrial sources as well as municipalities and current waste management infrastructure to recover that plastic waste. Then the enrichment phase is when we add the mineral additives and convert it into Resonate. Now, the appreciation is when we put that into concrete products. We improve that value of the concrete products. We improve the performance of the concrete products. And then when those go into ultimate applications, into commercial buildings, into affordable climate resistant housing solutions, we all prosper. Communities prosper, the world prospers. Currently in Costa Rica, we've built over 700 homes, affordable housing in conjunction with Habitat for Humanity that all utilize Resonate. Now, we're already working on our second version of Resonate, and we're calling that Resonate C. We've done a significant amount of lab testing, and it's on the cusp of being commercially demonstrated. So what Resonate C actually does is we take the core Resonate particle and we batter that with a cement paste. And as I mentioned, cement does contain calcium hydroxide, and we expose flue gas to that battered Resonate particle. And the flue gas, the CO2 from the flue gas actually reacts with the calcium hydroxide and creates calcium carbonate, which calcium carbonate is limestone. So essentially what happens is it absorbs CO2, it creates a limestone shell around the initial Resonate particle. Now, when we go through that reactive process, we also put in nylon fibers for reinforcement. So what we ultimately get is an aggregate which has a core, a Resonate core. It has a calcium carbonate shell. It has absorbed CO2, and it has nylon fiber reinforcement. And that absorption of the CO2 is considerable. It's up to about 10% of the weight of Resonate. So we're looking at, a ton of Resonate will absorb about 100 kilograms of CO2. Now, what we do is we utilize Resonate C in particular in ready mix concrete or the poured in place concrete. It has incredible benefits to that. And that is for most reasons is because of that CO2. That CO2 actually accelerates the curing of the ready mix. And normally you'd use an additive to accelerate curing. It adds air entrainment to help with freeze-thaw cycles, which is, I'm in the mid-Atlantic region of the United States outside of New York right now, and freeze-thaw is a considerable issue here. And as a result of the nylon reinforcement, as well as the accelerated curing due to carbonation rather than hydration, we get increased strength. We get increased strength, and what that allows us to do is reduce the amount of cement used in a concrete mix. Now, once you reduce the amount of cement, one, there's a huge cost savings because cement is incredibly expensive, but two, there's also a huge carbon benefit because cement is very carbon intensive to produce. And ultimately, one of the biggest benefits is that it will sequester that CO2 forever. Now, we're also utilizing Resonate in asphalt. We have some development partners and testing partners. Texas A&M Transportation Institute is another one. The National Center for Asphalt Technology at Auburn University is another one. Global Via is a Spanish company, and they're working with us in Costa Rica. In Costa Rica, we actually have a lab that is very much dedicated to the study of resonate utilization in hot mix asphalt. So that's also going through considerable lab testing and should be ready for commercialization very soon. So I mentioned early on scalability. A scalability of our resonate processing facilities is extremely flexible. This is an ideal solution for an island where all the material can be collected, it can be processed, and it can be used on island. It can be a closed loop on the island. The facility you see on the right is our Costa Rican facility. Currently, that is processing about 500 kilograms of resonate per day. However, we just entered into a partnership with the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. That facility will scale over the course of the remainder of 2021 into 2022, up to a point of being able to process 72 tons per day. So we can actually scale depending on the accessibility of the plastic waste stream and the demand for offtake. In other words, the demand for construction and concrete. So again, it makes it a perfect solution for smaller islands that are not able to either export their plastic waste or they're running out of landfill space and obviously do not want to incinerate plastic due to the CO2 issues there. And that is the end of our very, very primary overview of CRDC Global and Resonate. I hope we have some time for some questions, and I do hope that we have some questions.
Ross, Donald, sorry about that. I believe we are not able to take questions. Normally we would love to, but we've got a really packed schedule. We've got a lot more sessions to go, and we are about 15 minutes over. So we would just like to thank you very much for joining us. Fascinating concept, and something I think that we all have a lot of interest in. If people can follow up if they need to get in touch with you through the Bureau of Statistics and Plans. Any other input? No? All right. Well, thank you again very, very much for joining us. We really appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
The afternoon breakout sessions consisted of 3 topics, including a presentation entitled Enabling Our Pacific Partners.
Buenas, half a day. My name is Jeff Herzog, and I'm up here with Rhiannon Kucharski, and we're from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Honolulu District. So I learned a long time ago, never come empty-handed. So over there on table 23, we brought some Honolulu Cookie Company. Don't tell the Dusitani staff, I don't want to get us in trouble. So please go over there, get some cookies. But also while you're over there, I have a couple of handouts. So what I really need is the help of the community and the professionals and the planners here in Guam. We're right now conducting a watershed management study, and I'll talk about that later on. But over there is a simple questionnaire that if you can take it, look at the questions, and then email the point of contact on there your answers. That way, we're not doing an official survey, but we're doing a focus group of planners here in Guam. So I appreciate it if you do that. And in addition to that, because of the COVID restrictions and because of the medical requirements, we couldn't bring our full team down. So on September 2nd, Chamorro Standard Time, we're going to hold a virtual workshop for our new Guam Coastal Atlas and our Shoreline Atlas that we're developing. And it's an interactive workshop. So there's a flyer for that over on table 23. So when you're picking up your cookies, please pick one of those up. And then an example of a product that Shoreline Atlas can provide is there next to it. And I've brought 2 copies, so if you want to take a look at it while you're eating your cookies and picking up your flyers, please feel free to do so. Now, in the meantime, we've been sitting all morning, and I'm an old retired Army First Sergeant, and so like sitting just kills me. So while you're walking over to get your cookies, we're just gonna take a couple of minutes and stretch while we're doing our introductions. Again, my name is Jeff Herzog. I am the Deputy Chief for Civil and Public Works for the Honolulu District, and I'll let Rhiannon kind of introduce herself, and then we'll get started with our presentation while we're just doing a little bit of stretching and moving around and getting the blood flowing again. Thank you.
Half a day, good afternoon. Hope everybody enjoyed their lunch. It's always hard to follow up lunch because everyone's groggy, so if you want to stand up, stretch, walk around while we're talking, please feel free to do that. So today, if you can pull up our presentation. I know we're in a time crunch, so I'm going to keep going while they get the slides pulled up. So what I want to do today is introduce you basically to the Corps of Engineers, and in particular to our Civil Works mission. So if you have ever heard of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers before today, raise a hand. A couple of people have heard of us. Okay, cool. After today, next time that question gets asked, everyone in this room will be able to raise their hand. So I'm going to tell you a bit about the Honolulu District, our area of responsibility, the missions that we have in the Corps for Civil Works, our Interagency Coordination and Collaboration Program, talk to you about our Civil Works programs, how you develop a project with the Corps, and what a letter of interest or request is. We'll talk about our key mission areas and get into a little bit more detail about those. And Jeff is going to talk to you about some of our non-traditional civil works planning and technical type studies that we can do and have done in Guam and in Oceania. And we'll talk a little bit also about emergency assistance. And throughout the process, we would love to engage with you and take questions. So I have a couple of pit stops along the way just for that. And so please don't be shy. Please ask us some questions. So, of course, and for continuing education, these are the slides. And then there is a QR code at the end. And if you wouldn't mind going to the first slide with the map. Okay, so this is the Honolulu District's area of responsibility. It encompasses 12 million square miles. Yes, I said million. 5 time zones, 2 congressional districts, 3 U.S. territories. And our district headquarters is located on Fort Shafter on Oahu in Hawaii. And we do have field offices in Guam and American Samoa. Next slide, please. So the Corps is unique among federal agencies as we are not a granting agency. We are project funded. We work at the request and in partnership of our local sponsors to address the nation's toughest water resources challenges. Today, we're going to focus on civil works and interagency and international services and talk briefly about emergency assistance. Next slide, please. So, interagency coordination and collaboration is key to our process. The Corps coordinates, collaborates, and partners with many federal, state, and local agencies, as well as nonprofit organizations, like, for example, the Nature Conservancy, which we heard about earlier, in its water resources missions. And this slide shows just a few of all those folks that we collaborate with. Next slide, please. So there are 3 main areas in civil works that the Corps works in to enable our partners. The first is feasibility planning. This can range from large-scale mega projects down to small-scale targeted efforts. Costs of construction can range very widely from, say, $1 million to upwards of $1 billion or even more. The mission is about addressing the needs of our partners, the communities, and the nation that we're serving. The second area, which is near and dear to my heart, is watershed planning. We can study all of the water resources related issues in a given watershed, conduct technical analysis, and coordinate and collaborate with government agencies and other stakeholders to come up with a synergistic and strategic watershed management plan for implementation over a 50-year planning period. And the third area in which we can help is technical studies. These can range from comprehensive plans, inventory and identification of problems, development of coordinated solutions, and recommendations and prioritization of actions. Next slide, please. So under our Civil Works program, we have several priority mission areas, including navigation, flood risk management, coastal storm risk management, ecosystem restoration, and watershed planning. We sometimes work on projects that were specifically authorized by Congress, and we also have programs such as the Continuing Authorities Program for small projects for study, design, and construction that are less than 15 million federal. Other programs for technical and emergency assistance include the Planning Assistance to States and Territories Program, Floodplain Management Services, and Flood Control and Coastal Emergency Program, which is a program that supports our partners and sponsors through the Public Law 8499 program. And we'll talk more about each of those coming up. Next slide, please. So this flowchart is a representation of the Civil Works project development process for general investigations and for continuing authorities program. We must have a local sponsor request for assistance linked to congressional authority, or in other words, permission, and appropriations, or in other words, money, before we can initiate a project. So there has to be a local need linked to permission and funding in order for us to help. Next slide, please. So you might be asking, who is a potential partner? It could be a state government, a local government, a special district. We can partner with public universities and even nonprofit organizations. And I want to break here to see if we have any questions or comments and remind you, you can get priority and a cookie if you come over to this mic and ask a question, and Dawn is saying, cookies here. And sorry for those virtual, I don't yet know how to send a virtual cookie. So sorry about that. So any questions or comments at this point? Oh, I see one over here. Okay, so the question is, where can the Guam Shoreline Atlas be downloaded? And I'm going to give that one to Jeff.
So on September 2nd, we will go live with it to make it an interactive experience for you to be able to pick your location and to pick the different filters that you want. So I would encourage you that after September 2nd, when we go live, that's when you'll be able to interact with the interactive website.
So September 2nd. I have a question in the back. Okay, so the question is, does our responsibility include Palau, the FSM, and the RMI? So we help in those areas at the request of other agencies, most often at the request of the Office of Insular Affairs, and that's through a program that Jeff is going to discuss in detail later on. But the bottom line is, yes, we are assisting out there right now. Any other questions before I keep going? Okay, I don't see any, so next slide, please. There'll be other opportunities, don't worry. Okay, so now I'm going to take you on a quick tour of our key mission areas. So navigation is a critical one, especially out here in our island territories. So in navigation, we can help with technical studies. We conduct operation and maintenance, for example, dredging of federal navigation facilities, and we can recommend beneficial uses of dredge material and much more. Next slide, please. The next mission I'm going to talk about is flood risk management, where we seek to reduce the risk to lives and property from flooding. Ways we can assist include, but aren't limited to, floodplain management, inventory of drainages and shoreline problems, helping to establish priority areas for flood risk reduction measures, and helping with interagency coordination and collaboration so that the response during and after a flood can be most effective. I'm looking at my FEMA friends, right? We want to be effective before, during, and after any kind of event. Next slide, please. To reduce flood risk, it really takes a village. It takes all of us, and so we really have to have a whole of government approach. Each of these steps that you see here, or sets of actions, build one upon another to reduce flood risk. And as you can see, it really requires action from all levels of government, all the way down to us as individual homeowners who live and work in a floodplain. Next slide, please. So our next mission is coastal storm risk management. The Corps can help with issues such as coastal flooding, shoreline erosion, sea level rise, saltwater intrusion into groundwater, and much more. We can conduct technical studies to recommend solutions, help create regional sediment management plans, and help with interagency coordination and collaboration. Next slide, please. So the fourth main mission area is aquatic ecosystem restoration. So as aquatic ecosystems degrade and are lost, the need to restore these ecosystems grows. We can enable our partners in restoring aquatic ecosystems to a more natural, less degraded state by looking for ecosystem opportunities in conjunction with other purposes, by studying and making recommendations for specific ecosystem restoration projects, and by conducting technical studies to understand land use activities and their effects on aquatic and marine environments. We can also help, of course, again, through interagency coordination and collaboration. Next slide, please. So the fifth main mission area is watershed planning. The Corps is uniquely able to help strategically plan across an entire watershed to consider a host of water resources problems in partnership with our non-federal sponsor, federal, state, and local agencies, and stakeholders in order to create a strategic watershed management plan for implementation over the next 50 years. And we are actually currently doing a watershed management study for Guam based on an emergency supplemental bill that was passed in 2019, and that is actively ongoing. And I'm sure Jeff may want to share more about that when he comes up. And last but not least, next slide, please. The Corps can assist in water supply and environmental infrastructure through technical assistance and interagency coordination and collaboration. And now I'm going to hand it back to Jeff to take you through the rest of our presentation, unless there are any more questions for me at this point or comments from the audience. Okay, I don't see any, so Jeff, take it away.
So I can't stand in one place. It'll drive you crazy. It'll drive me crazy. So I'm just going to use this mic if it's okay with everybody. So I want to touch on something that the senator here spoke about this morning when she talked to you about the Ahupua Concept, which is from the Hawaiian Islands. And so what I want to do is I want to take it a step back even further than that, so that way you can, in your mind, start to picture how, or either how it's already being done here in Guam from the old Chamorro customs and history, or how it could be brought into Guam. And so the Ahupua actually means pig gate in Native Hawaiian. And it was a way to divide different land divisions, and it was based off of a watershed concept. But the Ahupua actually came from the next higher level of land division, and that was greater than one watershed, but multiple watersheds, called the moku. So the moku, you might have, as pointed out by the mayor earlier, the northern region of Guam is one moku. The central region is another moku, and then southern Guam is another moku. And then altogether, all three regions would make up the Mokupuni. And the Mokupuni is the actual island of Guam. So you have the island, and then you have your different regions, and then you have the Ahupua. And then within the Ahupua, you would have your Ahupua Li'i, which is your chiefs who manage that watershed. And the way it would work is in your upper watershed area where you get most of your rain. I'm sure many of you are familiar that up in the mountains you get a lot more rain than you do down here in Tumon Bay. So you get your rain up there, so that's where you do your agriculture. So when the rain and you're growing your agriculture, what happens to that nutrient-rich soils? It starts making its way back down. And as it makes its way back down, in the middle floodplain, that's where your people lived. And your people live there. Why? Because you don't want to be too close to the coastal storms, but you don't want to be right up there where it's raining all the time. You want to enjoy some sun in your backyard once in a while. And then down below that, that's where you had your fish ponds. And that's where you had your access to the ocean. And so what they would do is they would utilize the entire watershed from a watershed management philosophy. Why do I know that? Because I'm not an engineer, and so I really need to focus on my people skills and my communication. So how do you do that? You learn about the culture and the history, all right? And Guam, very much like Hawaii, is very rich in culture and history. And so I just wanted to touch upon that and then bring that into 2021. So 30, 40, 50 years ago, when you thought of the Corps of Engineers, you thought of concrete, you thought of flumes, get the water, protect the people, walls. Let's build walls. Everywhere we need walls. Today, you still need walls in certain locations, but it's much more of a broad concept. And the Corps of Engineers, like every agency, is a learning organization. So while we still sometimes have to make recommendations for walls and hardened structures, all right, it's because in the immediate need, that's what it calls for. Someone wants me to stand behind a podium. So in the immediate need, you need that structure. But that doesn't dismiss the fact that you need to think out generations to come and the impacts. Yesterday, I took my commander and we went down to Malesa and Maritzo and met with the mayor. We went to Agate and we met with the mayor. We went to Umatic and met with the mayor. And each area is different and unique, but they share similar concerns, and their concerns is for the future. And so that's where we can come in with some of these non-traditional civil works. See, I did actually come back around to my point. That's where we come in with some of these non-traditional civil works authorities to help you plan for the future. Rhiannon talked about earlier some of the studies and projects that we do to help with the immediate. And when I say immediate, I talk about the next 50 years. That's when we look out for our economic period of analysis. But these non-traditional civil works help you evolve as a community, change the culture and the thought process so that you're setting up beyond that 50-year period of analysis. So some of these are floodplain management services. Right now, the territory of Guam actually has an active floodplain management services project, and it is to help update your comprehensive storm drainage manual. And so you heard Captain Bearden earlier talking about how there's multiple manuals here. So what we've been charged to do and asked to do is to come in and help the territory of Guam and our interagency partners go from multiple manuals down to a comprehensive storm drainage manual. So we just finished phase 1 of that in FY20, and we just literally last week received our approval to move forward into that phase 2 and to scope out. And the thing about FPMS, Floodplain Management Services, is it's 100% federal. And so for you all to be able to have that 100% federal assistance shows great credit towards ED and BSP and the government of Guam to be able to work with us and help to develop those scopes. Other things that we can do in those floodplain management services, because it's so competitive, next slide, it can actually be done through a different type of authority where we cost share with the territory in order to do very similar things that we did under the floodplain management services. The reason Guam is unique is because it's a U.S. territory. So to just spit out some legal lingo, under Section 1156 of WRDA 2014, all U.S. territories and Native American tribes are eligible for a cost-sharing waiver with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and it's adjusted for inflation every year. So this year, the territory of Guam is eligible for a $511,000 cost-sharing waiver towards the cost share of a study. I will tell you that the Comprehensive Storm Drainage Manual update was about $250,000. So what that would mean under a PAS study is the territory of Guam pays nothing. And yet you get the full federal assistance under this planning assistance. And so we do have other projects under that authority with the territory of Guam, such as your coastal shoreline atlas that we're working on over there. So we have multiple with the same end state in mind, and that is preparing the community of Guam and building its resilience through education, outreach, and understanding of data. Next slide. So the territory of Guam, and I said this in 2019, my first year coming here, and I reiterate it every time, was the first U.S. territory to stand up a Silver Jackets interagency collaboration team. So congratulations. Since we started the territory of Guam Silver Jackets team in 2019, U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and finally even the District of Columbia started up their own Silver Jackets team. So congratulations for you all being on the forefront. And what does Silver Jackets do? Silver Jackets does exactly what you saw this morning. It gets rid of the stovepipes of information sharing, where we each in our own agency, we do a study. And what do we do with that study when we're done? We turn around and we put it on a shelf, is what we used to do. Now we put it on a shared drive. And then 20 years from now, we'll look at it and go, oh, I didn't know I had that. So the Silver Jackets Interagency Collaboration Team takes that stovepipe out, and we get together and we discuss, hey, what is your agency's mission, priority, and vision over the next year? Well, my mission is this. Well, hey, you know what? We have an initiative that we hadn't planned on doing it until next year or the year after, but if we partner with you on this, it brings additional federal resources to the table. Not to mention, coming out of it, it makes us more powerful for a grant, or it makes us more powerful for additional money later on. So let us move our priorities around, or you move your priorities around, and let's partner on this initiative going forward. So I will tell you that this year, in 2020 actually, we started an interagency proposal in which we were supposed to be able to bring together in a similar workshop to the Guam Planning Symposium to be able to provide you all this information. So unfortunately, COVID hit, and so we've had to do a lot of things virtually, but out of that, we now have your Guam Coastal Atlas, we have this comprehensive storm drainage manual update, and you get to see me because it paid for my travel to come down. Thank you. But it's not a granting organization, it's a partnering organization, and coming out of this, it makes us stronger for proposals. And it's been done nationwide, and Hawaii actually just stood up its Silver Jackets team for the first time. So we now have all 50 states and 3 territories, and my next target is CNMI and American Samoa, because really it's about getting rid of the information stovepipes. Next slide. Okay, so the interagency and international services, did anyone read the newspaper this morning and see my commander's picture in the newspaper? So yesterday we met, and luckily I wasn't there, I was out touring Hagatnya. But my commander met with Rhiannon and Don Schlack sitting over at table 23 to discuss Guam Memorial Hospital. So in 2019, Office of Insular Affairs asked Don and his team to come down and do an assessment of revamping and revitalizing Guam Memorial Hospital. They did that under the Interagency and International Services. In 2021 and 2020, down in Kosroy, Chap, Chuk, Yap, RMI, the Freely Associated States, we do a lot of work for Department of State, Office of Insular Affairs, whether we're doing a dam inspection right now in Kosroy. We've done a university down there. We've talked to Leo Espia in the Office of Civil Defense about potentially expanding your emergency operations center here. So the interagency and international services essentially means we serve as your contractor and your engineer expertise, and potentially your construction management experts. Now, this is not to offend or upset any of my A&E firms out there, because we still love you and we still use you all the time. However, there's certain areas where, as the federal agency, we can provide a level of expertise working with other federal agencies because we speak the same Greek, and it kind of moves things along in a more orderly fashion. Not part of interagency and international services, but similar, we also, in the time of emergency, work for Fema over here, sitting at the special table as their engineers. So I was the alternate care facility for the COVID-19 response throughout the Pacific program manager. And so just this last year, working with the government of Guam and FEMA Region 9, We increased bed capacity by 26 beds at Guam Memorial Hospital by providing negative pressure spaces and increased electrical capacity to be able to handle the surge that Guam experienced. And what that did was, with the assistance of FEMA, is to set up the midterm plan for Guam Memorial Hospital as they work on the long-term plan, potentially through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Honolulu District, and Don Schlack sitting over there at table 23. So with that being said, we're doing great. I've got 30 minutes to facilitate a discussion and just have a conversation with you all and answer questions. Now, while we are not the regulatory division, you do have a regulatory and permitting representative who typically lives here on island. His name is Albert Williams. Nice guy. He replaced Karen Aurelius, who moved, in case you knew her. Albert took her place. Really nice guy. He also serves as your one door to the core. We are looking at expanding our office down here in Guam. But if you're familiar with hiring processes across America, it's no better in the Corps of Engineers. So, but we're always recruiting. So if you're looking for a job, I wear that hat too. So what I'd like to do is just kind of open it up for questions, discussions, and conversation. It could be about anything water resources related, or it might be about vertical construction. It may be regulatory or permitting. If you do have a question about regulatory or permitting, what I will tell you is we'll take that question down and we'll bring it back to our regulatory division and have them answer that question. And that light's really bright, so if I can't see you, you have to throw something at me. Yes, ma'am.
Hi there. So earlier we heard Mr. Romero talk about how he implements the FEMA's National Flood Insurance Program here in Guam. Can you talk a little bit about how your floodplain management and services program differs or complements FEMA's floodplain management program?
Sure, great question. So actually we work in a complementary fashion. And in fact, while we are prohibited from developing a plan in order for you to develop a floodplain. That's different than helping you to reduce flood risk, risk to community, economy, and to your infrastructure. But we take advantage of opportunities such as Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, the BRIC grant, and work with the states and the territories in order to reduce that flood risk and help you as a community who's just now getting started in the community rating system. See, I threw a plug out for you through the community rating system, because that puts money back in your pocket. So the programs that we work with FEMA and your state hazard mitigation officer on will then turn around and pay dividends back to you monetarily through this community rating system, as well as through the National Flood Insurance Program. So we complement each other in that manner. Other questions? Yes, there's more cookies. So since I've got a little bit of time, you heard the governor this morning. She talked about an agreement she just signed yesterday for East Hagatna. So I'm going to tell you all that East Hagatna is one of those projects where we talk about we may have to harden for the immediate while we look to plan for the future. And so Marine Corps Drive is a major thoroughfare. You all know that. I don't have to tell you that. But unlike North Carolina, unlike Maryland, where you have 300-foot wide beaches, you all have 15-foot wide beaches. And unlike having 5 feet of sand to step on and roll around in, you have very little sand, which is great for the fringing reef out in the bay. However, it's bad when it comes to erosion, wave attack, and wind erosion. And so what happens is it starts to threaten the major thoroughfare that is Marine Corps Drive, and it starts to threaten the public utilities. So what may be the correct solution is to place some sort of revetment there and then to allow for vegetation to grow on top of it to make it look more natural and blend in, but it provides that erosion protection. But at the same time, through our Guam watershed management study and through our recommendations and like using tools such as that coastal atlas, we need to then look at what is the long-term plan. Because with sea level rise and climate change and continued erosion, even if we harden that structure and harden that road to protect it, over time, it's still gonna become vulnerable to climate change and sea level rise. So it's a matter of looking at the immediate, but then looking into the future and not dismissing that responsibility and what we call the environmental operating principles of design. So the others, no one's asking questions, so I guess I'm just gonna go ahead.
I'll go again. I was wondering if you could give an example project that the Silver Jackets team here collaborated on?
So, right, so this particular one, Captain Bearden presented on it this morning, in which we created a subgroup called Policy within our Silver Jackets team, and they discussed the risks and hazards associated with having multiple storm drainage manuals and policies, and B, what could we do to recommend? And then they put it up there this morning. And so we didn't pay Captain Bearden to do that. However, it was through the Silver Jackets interagency collaboration team that it facilitated that discussion to go forward. So while we didn't pay him to do that, that's one of those instances where our agency's visions and objectives aligned. Sure.
So, having recently joined Honolulu District from a district with a well-established Silver Jackets team, I thought it might be fun for you to hear some examples of projects that have been done in the West as well, just to sort of inspire you for the kind of things that Hawaii and Guam can now do under their Silver Jackets team. So one really creative thing we did was to create a coloring book for children. Who here has little children in their life? Your own, grandkids, nieces, nephews, just about everybody, right? I'm the mom of 2 boys, now 9 and 11. And so creating that coloring book to engage with children about what a watershed is, what flooding is, what it means to have a personal emergency plan as a family and create a go kit. And so, we engaged with the kids in there. We had a foreword to the families and teachers who are using it. And then in the back, we have an action plan fact sheet so that you and your family can actually make a plan for your particular household. And so one thing I was brainstorming with Ed is like we should bring that coloring book to Guam, right, and to Hawaii to pass out in the schools and with our kids and families. Another really creative thing we did was we created a video game, which I'm not supposed to say, I'm supposed to say educational game, with the state of Nevada, which they now host on their website, and it's called Nevada Flood Fighter. And again, that's a way to engage with kids of all ages, including adults who still have a kid inside of them and love to play video games. And you get to be a flood manager, in the game and see how well you can do. And let me tell you, it's not easy to be a flood manager. When I teach my class every year for Watershed Planning, I have my students who are all adults play this game and see who can get to the highest score during the week. And then I give them a prize. And it's really hard to pass the levels. And the idea is it's meant to be challenging, but managing flood risk, managing coastal storm risk is challenging, right? Making sure your stormwater drains properly, that's challenging. But we can rise, to that. And through creating community awareness and awareness in our future generations, they're going to be enabled to be more ready, to be more prepared, to turn around and not drown, right? To not go out in the ocean on that stormy day. And just to have that go plan with their family so that they can be safe in the case of floodwaters in, around, or near their home. So hopefully that's a little bit inspiring. Anyone else have any questions for us? Okay. Well, we just want to thank you so much for having us and inviting us and for all the planning and preparation that went into this event and for your time and attention. So thank you very much.
you.